out there. And what I learned, which really transformed me, I mean, I've been to a lot of Native ceremonies, I've been permitted to come and participate and pray with them, and I just was kind of on an express train through all of this. I don't know how it happened, it just kind of happened, you know. And I think the most fundamental piece of it for me was really understanding how what the Native worldview is, and it is the interrelationship of all things and the interdependency of all things. So when they say water is life, that's ground zero for everything to stay alive. Besides the sun, we need water. And so water is their first medicine. They use it in all of their ceremonies, just like Christians would use it in baptism, and in Judaism we have the ritual baths. So trying to remind people in dominant culture about this fundamental relationship, because we're so spoiled with flip the light on, you know, flip the faucet on, and not connecting our actions and what goes on in industry to what is happening in the environment. So now the chickens have come home to roost, and everybody's like, why is the water so polluted? When all, you know, this industry has been running rampant for decades, and now, you know, even those little minimum things that were put in place have been removed by the current administration. So, because of my work with Native people, and I also set up a lot of teaching programs when elders come to visit, and by the way, there's an Algonquin elder coming to Split Rock. He's going to be here maybe for 3 to 4 weeks, and we're going to have teachings. He grew up in the bush. His whole family have been really avid environmental protectors. They have clear cutting up in his territory. And so what I've tried to do is to really be a bridge between dominant culture, and by bringing elders in and setting up cultural exchange programs, teaching for people to learn what it's not their belief about the environment. These are fundamental universal laws of the primordial elements that they interact with, they feel it, and we're so shut off from that. To remind people what their priorities are. It's not going to the mall and having a nice car. It's very fundamental things like water, air, and their philosophy of making decisions based on the next 7 generations. So can you imagine if nuclear scientists, you know, said, well, I got this great idea to make energy, but oh, you know, the waste is going to be around for a couple of million years. Maybe we shouldn't do that, you know, because it would, you know, the next generations have to clean up the mess. And so we certainly have enough mess for the next 7 generations to deal with. I don't know why I was sent out to South Dakota, because I certainly encountered a lot of prejudice. I mean, in your face. Like, you know, my teacher introduced me to someone, and he said, oh, you're from New York, huh? You know what your people did to my people? And I was like, I kind of learned the correct history, and my father only came here in 1937, so I wasn't part of the land grab, although if you peel it back, we're definitely beneficiaries of everything that preceded with colonization, and not honoring any of the treaties. And when we tell people that the Native American Religious Freedom Act was only passed in 1978, they're like, but this is America, you know, you can do whatever you want here. Well, not so for the Indians, the Aboriginal. So yes, they were practicing their ceremonies of thousands of years, and people went to jail and died, and many of it went underground to protect those waves. And so, you know, I've been extremely fortunate to have participated in many of those ceremonies, it was very powerful, life-changing experiences. When I met Kieran at Split Rock, he had also been with the Lakota people for many years. We just had a kind of a natural understanding because we had gone through the change, trying to decolonize. And it's a really, really long process. There's so much historic trauma to deal with. It takes an enormous amount of education, patience, and also bearing witness to none of the treaties were ever honored in the United States. And the reservations are really prisoner of war camps. They actually have numbers. And they were coerced with food and, relocating and boarding schools where thousands of Native children in the United States and Canada were taken away from their families. I try to explain this to people. It's like, say another country came in and invaded the United States and they took away all of our children and forbid them to speak English and sent them to boarding schools for years and turned them into their other culture. So this kind of historic trauma residue continues to reverberate today. My teacher is 3 years older than me, and he was punished for speaking his native language, which is the only language he knew. So it wasn't just in the 1800s, it went on until the 1970s in Canada.
A lot of those children were never returned home.
Yes.
They're still trying to get their families back to their...
Yeah, they lost contact, so that's a really grim footnote. Not really a footnote in the United States history, it's a bedrock of the United States history, and it's really hard to deal with that as somebody who's an occupier, us. We're the occupiers, we're the beneficiaries of white privilege. The whole system is set up by, wealthy white male landowners who were slave owners. So between slavery and the genocide of the Native people, our country has a huge karmic wound that needs to be healed. And by doing these prayer walks and having circles and going down to Split Rock and helping Native organizations in any way that you can as part of that healing. They call it mending the sacred hoop because the hoop of life is broken. That's why there's environmental damage, and it represents the spiritual damage that's in us. So that's what our collective mission is, to become aware of that, share the information, do prayers, and become allies in the best way that we can.
Thank you.
Anybody else related to Sandra, would you like to speak now?
And now I feel like I'm connected. I was just before I wasn't sure, what was going on and so on. Karen, do you think we need some light either?
Yeah, we can.